How do you get into voice acting? How do you get into doing animation voices? And I said, well, not the way I did. Any other way, I would imagine, is the way to get in. Because you know that phrase, life is what's happening to you while you're busy making other plans? That is definitely what happened to me. I moved into New York when I was 17. I got a scholarship to go to Juilliard, and I started supporting myself. And I was going to be, hello. I was going to be a stage actor. And so I trained with doing Shakespeare, the Greeks, classic stage acting, a really traditional theatrical education, which is a better, hello. And I was in an amazing class at Juilliard. And I was much younger than everyone because I graduated high school early and I was on my own. I was supporting myself. And my roommate was Robin Williams. Isn't that amazing? She's my roommate.
Wow.
And my classmate as well. And my other classmate that I used to drink way too much with was Kelsey Grammer. Amazing. And wonderful actresses named Harriet Harris and Frances Conroy.
Yes.
I mean, amazing actors. It was called Group 6, and it was a kind of famous group. All these talented people came together at the same time and formed this group. So the inspiration to excel and to develop was really strong. And what I didn't realize was that I was preparing for something that you couldn't make a living in. The theater. It's almost impossible to make a living in the theater. I was just doing what I loved. Right? And but when I got out, I started doing Broadway, off-Broadway. I was very lucky. I started working right away. And I started doing some television stuff, some guest spots. And I happened to be in LA and doing a pilot for a series. And my voiceover agent said, go over to Warner Brothers, they're doing a new show, Batman, the animated series. They're looking for the voice of Batman. And I said, new show? I said, I grew up on Batman. I know what. He said, no, it's never been an animated show. I was so naive about the whole animation world. I didn't know it had never been an animated show. So I go in, and I meet Bruce Timm, Eric Rogomsky, Andrea Romano, Paul Dini. I mean, this is like the gold standard, right, of creative talent. But I didn't know who any of them were because it wasn't my field. So Bruce Timm says, well, what do you know about Batman? I said, well, I know the Adam West show when I was growing up. And he said, no. That's not what we're doing. We all love Adam, but that's not what this is. He said, don't you know the Dark Knight legend of watching his parents murdered in front of him as a child in a crime alley and becoming this dark figure avenging justice? And I said, no, I've never read that. He said, well, what kind of childhood did you have? So he had to educate me on the whole thing. So I said, well, look, let me just use my imagination. And they had seen over 500 people at this time. They've been looking for months. And they'd seen TV people, film people, the kind of actors you get in LA. Well, I was a stage actor who happened to be in LA doing a pilot. And they didn't realize what they really needed was a stage actor. They needed someone who played Laertes and Lysander and Edgar and Edmund and Achilles and Orestes, who've done these great heroic, tragic, classic roles because of all the superheroes, that's Batman. He has no superpowers. He can't fly, he can't transform, he can't see through walls. He's a man. He's a human being. In fact, he's a very flawed man. He's a tragic hero. And that's what appeals to people, is his darkness. And so I just put myself in my imagination in this booth. And I said, well, let me just improvise. And as I was thinking more and more about watching in Crime Alley my parents murdered in front of me and what that would do to me, my voice just went to very dark, somber, painful place. started doing this sound. And they hired me on the spot. I said, that's it. That's it. But that's an interesting insight into what acting is about, because it's about your imagination. It's about what you bring to the role. It's about having the idea to do the voice. People come up to me all the time and say, oh, listen to me do you. And they do a very convincing version of my Batman. And I say, okay, now I have to kill you. Because I won't work anymore if you get out. So you're dead. But it's not being able to imitate, it's being able to think of it, to come up with it. They'd seen 500 actors for this role. I bet there were a dozen or 24 actors in there who would have done just as good a job, but they just didn't think of it. It's coming up with the idea for the voice. That's what they're really hiring when they hire an actor. They're hiring your whole being. They're hiring, I was 30 when I started doing the role, so they're hiring the third, or no, actually I was older than that.
You don't look at
I'm older than I think I am. I was 34, sorry. But they were hiring 34 years of life experience. Everything that had happened to me. And how, the good things and the bad things. How it affects you. That's being an actor. They always say you are your instrument as an actor. That's what they mean. You are your instrument. Everything that makes you, every cell, every thought, every atom, that goes into your roles. And that changes the role for each person. That's why it's so interesting to see different actors do Batman. When Michael Keaton first started, I thought, he nailed it. This is great. I'm a big Michael Keaton fan. I love what he's done. And then to watch what George Clooney does with it, or Ben Affleck does with it, or all the various actors, Christian Bale, you see a different aspect of the character, a different take on the character. Certain nuances are different because of who they are. They can't not help but affect it in a different way. So it's really wonderful to watch it. Awesome. To me, Mark Hamill's the Joker. He just is the Joker. He's the Joker. He's my Joker, he's the Joker. And then Heath Ledger comes along, and he wasn't better than Mark, but he was insanely brilliant. He was brilliant in a different way. And Troy Baker comes along, and he's insanely brilliant too. But each one brings their own color, to the role. And everyone has their personal favorites, but everyone says, "Who's your favorite Batman?" You can't.
It's you.
I can't.
No, it's you. It is. Am I wrong? Other than me.
Thank you. But so that's the thing about acting. And one of the wonderful things about doing these shows is the casts we've had. God! To work with Mark Hamill, Roddy McDowell, Everett Zimbabwe Jr., everybody, Tara Strong, John Glover. John Glover and I have known each other for about 40 years. We did theater together, we've done mini-series together, we've done so many shows together, and when we ended up being Batman and the Riddler, that was just wild. He's a crazy man. But it's just between you and me. But the actors I got to work with, Michael Ansara as Mr. Freeze, is heartbreaking. It's a heartbreaking performance. All the actors, I feel so lucky. I worked with Ed Asner. He did Granny Goodness. Cloris Leachman came in just before she passed. It's been such an extraordinary thing. Adam West as the Great Ghost. So it's been an amazing ride for me. But acting is as much about reacting as it is acting. You give, and then you get. And then you react to what you get. And if I have someone like Mark Hamill giving me the most amazing performance, it just pulls it out of me. It pulls a better performance out of me. So it makes me a better actor. It's really hard to work in a vacuum. And Mark said the most wonderful thing about me in an interview once. He said, Kevin makes me a better actor. That is one of the biggest compliments you can give to another actor, because it means that you are giving that person so much that you're pulling more out of them than they would have done on their own. And that's an amazing compliment. But that's how I think about the different actors I've gotten to work with. I feel so lucky about it. I love that.
Absolutely.
But early on, there was a funny thing that happened. We went on the air in '92. So this is technically the 30th year.
That's right. 30 years. Excellent.
Early on, now many of you may have heard this story, but hopefully some of you haven't. I was on my way to the studio at and when you do on-camera work, you've got to get there really early to get into makeup. So I was on the side of the studio at 5 a.m., 4:30. It was dark. And the Hollywood Post Office is off of Sunset. And I just needed to put some mail in the slot on my way to the studio. There were some bills I had to get. So I pull into the parking lot and it's dark. Dark. And I run over and I put my mail in and I go, "Hey buddy, you got $1?" And I look over and I see this pile of blankets and stuff on the side of the parking lot. And I realize there's a person under there. He goes, "Buddy, you got any change? You got $1?" I said, "I'm sorry, all I have is my mail. Literally, all I have is my mail." And he goes, "Oh my God, you're Kevin Conroy." And I was so freaked out. I thought, did you read my mail? How could he read my mail? It's pitch black. And it's like this high, the writing's like, I said, "Yeah." He said, "You're Batman." He said, "How do you know that?" I said, "Everybody knows who's Batman." I said, "Seriously, how do you know that?" And he said, "Well, remember Radio Shacks? Or Circuit City or something." He said, "There's a Circuit City on Hollywood, and I go and watch your show every afternoon. I love your Batman." So he says, "You know what I want you to say?" That's what I want you to say. "Come on. I am vengeance." And I thought, oh my God. It's 4 o'clock in the morning. It's dark outside. So I said, "I am vengeance." He said, "I am the night." I said, "I am the night." He said, "Bring it home, Batman. Bring it home." So I said, "I am Batman." And we hear from the dark, "Shut the fuck up." It's 4 o'clock in the morning, asshole.
Clearly they were a Spider-Man fan. That was their problem.
But that day, I called Andre Romano and I said, "We are a hit."
Yes.
I said, and I told her the story, and she said, "That is priceless. That is priceless." She said, "I could see you in the dark in the middle of the morning doing that." So that's one of my favorite Batman stories.
Oh my goodness, that's fantastic. Oh, good job right there. We want to open things up for you guys. So there are 2 microphones on either side. Why, hello. See the first one jump. You got like a road together, you folks jumping over here. I love it. Robin, let's kick it off with you.
Hi, boss.
Hey, how you doing?
Really good.
Get in the bed, kid, Robin.
I'm on it. I already finished my homework and everything. So, I know it's been a long time since we've had any official Timbers, shows or movies or anything. And, probably not making another one. But if they were to make another movie or show at the DCAU, and they were like, "Kevin, whatever you want it to be about, we'll tell whatever story you want to tell. What kind of story would you want it to be?"
Oh my God. There's so many stories. There are so many. I wouldn't know where to begin. There are so many. I was so happy I got to do The Killing Joke. That was such a good experience. And the way that ended, it was just so wild. God, to be honest, I don't know where to begin with which ones. I know which ones I would like to have done, but sometimes they hire other actors. But that's a hard one for me to answer. I'm sorry, because I've gotten to do so many. I can't think right now. I'm sorry. That's a tough question. I'm
It's a
sorry.
good question.
It's a good
That's
question.
okay.
Yeah.
I gotta go watch the Batmobile anyway.
Yeah, watch the Batman.
Double wax.
Thank you.
Hello, friend.
Okay. Hello, Kevin. So, my biggest question is, as a voice actor myself, voicing Batman throughout many different projects, including Justice League, there's bound to be like a lot of vocal challenges that you constantly face as a voice actor, right?
Yeah, that's a good question actually, because this was a new thing for me. I came up with this voice on the spot, the way I described it to you, and then I realized when you do the shows, when you record the shows, Batman the Animated Series, Batman Beyond, the Justice League, Batman and Robin, they bring all the actors together in a big studio. So there's like 6 or 8 actors. And you get the other people to respond to work with. So it feeds your performance. But in 2 hours, you record a whole show. It's done pretty quickly. But what I hadn't anticipated was that show after show after show after show were going to need to be done. And that Batman was the central character of the shows. And that I was going to have to be doing this voice relentlessly. Well, I created that sound by doing everything you're not supposed to do with your voice. Everything you're not supposed to do, because it just sounded so good. I crunched down on my vocal cords. I pushed down. I was doing everything wrong. And sure enough, after about 2 months, I started losing my voice. And Andreas and Kevin, it's too late to change the voice. You gotta work this out. And I said, I didn't know you'd be using it so much. So I had to go back and kind of use my training from Juilliard, which is all about supporting from your diaphragms, right? And come up with a way to have more air come through it. So I wasn't doing the lazy man's version of it, of just crunching it down. I was doing a more theatrical version where you would do it from the stage, where you supported it with your diaphragm, and it was, workable. So that's one aspect of having to do the voice over time, how difficult it was. The other thing is, people always ask, how did it change over time? How has Batman changed over time? And I always answer, he doesn't. That's what the audience wants. They know him. You know, when someone is lying to you, you can hear a lie faster than you can see a lie.
Of course.
I can anyway. I can hear in someone's voice if they're lying. So, people can give you a poker face, but it's really hard to do a poker voice. So, I know that you would know if I was phoning it in, if I wasn't really doing it authentically, if I really wasn't grounding it in that pain of that dark moment. So for me, the challenge has been to keep it consistent, to keep it fresh. When you do work in the theater, you do 8 shows a week. The people who see it on Friday have to see just as good a show as the people who saw it on Monday.
It's true.
And it's your job as an actor to keep it alive, to keep it fresh. So that's been my job, I think, as Batman, is to keep it fresh over all these years. The biggest challenge to doing the voice is that, as I said, when you do it as a group with the other actors, as I said, acting is reacting as much as it is acting, and you get all that energy, all that juice from the other actors, and it keeps you alive, it keeps you present. When you do the games, like Arkham City, Arkham Knight, Arkham Asylum, just these small games I did. When you do those, because of the way the algorithms are created, the way that the different rabbit holes you go down, depending on how you play the game. Every soundtrack has to be completely separate. So every take has to be completely isolated. So they bring you in alone. And you're alone in a booth, and you're imagining the situation. You're imagining what the other actors are going to sound like. You're creating the character in your own head, and then you're coming up. And then you're acting, and you're completely isolated. It is completely different than doing the shows, where you get the other actors feeding you. And it's so much harder to create and to keep it fresh and to keep it real and to keep it consistent. And then, the way they want it is like, okay, you go, get out! And they say, great, Kevin, now give it to us with a smile. Get out. We love it. We love the smile. Keep the smile. Give it a little bit of irony. But with the smile. Get out. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. It gets that crazy. And then they want 3 takes of each one. And then they want, 5 different versions with 3 takes. And then you do that for 4 hours alone. And then you get an hour for lunch. And then you do 4 more hours in the afternoon. And then that goes on for a week. And by the end of the week, they let you go. And they go off and they write more stuff. And Arkham Knight, the third of the trilogy, has 36,000 lines of dialogue.
Wow.
Totally recorded. I felt like I did half of them. And it took 2 years to build, where they would bring me in for a week. Well, by Friday, you can't talk anymore. And you're not even sure, who you are anymore. I mean, it gets so crazy. It's so different than doing the shows. My point is, it's just a totally different experience. And you've got to keep the character alive. You've got to keep him believable. You've got to make him authentically the same person in that situation. And that's a challenge. That's a big challenge. But when you look at the results, and you think, that's me, doing the Arkham Knight, you're so proud of it, you know what I mean? But the creating of it is really, really, really challenging. So it's a good question. There are many. You want to remain true to the character, you want to be consistent with the character, but there are a lot of different venues where you have to take different things into account for how you're doing it. That's a good question.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, B-Man.
She was waiting all that time just to say that. That's all she wanted to say. She said, thanks for all that about recording. Thank you, B-Man.
Here's my audition. There you go. Hello.
Hi. You mentioned you drank a lot in your college days, so I'm curious, what is your favorite bat cocktail?
Wow.
You had to send me back there. Yeah, when I was a youth, I was a bit of a drinker. Which is kind of ironic because I came from a family of alcoholics, which is why I was out on my own when I was 17. The family just disintegrated. And ironically, I was a full scholarship student. I had no money. I was a mail boy in one of those private mail services in Manhattan. The guys you see with the cart going down Madison Avenue. I was doing that when I was 17. I was a waiter in a restaurant. I did everything. But I always managed to get $5 for a 6-pack of beer. That I always managed to find. I might not eat, but man, I could get that beer. I always really liked beer. Like Neil Kavanaugh. And what's his name? Justice?
Yes.
Whatever his name is. Mitch. And I liked, I really liked Chardonnay. I love Chardonnay.
Pinky's up, drink.
And vodka. But I have not had a drink in over 35 years. I am proud to say, Very proud to say. I also was a heavy smoker. I had to wake up. I was asleep when I was young. And I realized, it's sink or swim. It's a one-way ticket. You don't get to relive life. And I just stopped smoking, stopped drinking, started running every day, 6 miles a day, and just got my act together. And, it's in your power to do that. And only in your power to do that. You're the only one who can get you out of those holes. And luckily, thank God, I got myself out of that hole.
Good morning.
I
I have a question about how the Am I Blue scene in Just News made it happen. It's just it's a great thing to watch every once in a while, but it's
Am I blue? Am I blue? And these tears in my eyes telling you there was a time I was the only one, but now I'm the sad and lonely one, lonely. That all happened because Andrea knew that I loved to sing. And she just said to Brewston, Kevin sings. He's like a singer, and we've got to use that. And Bruce said, Batman doesn't sing. So they said, well, we've got to come up with a song. So, Am I Blue? How perfect is that for Batman to sing? Right? And so that's how it happened. It was really Andrea's idea.
she's cute.
Sure.
Thank you. Hello, Frank.
Hey, hi. Hey, Kevin. Thanks for being here. I was just asking because I grew up on the animated series, and then later playing the Arkham Knight games. The Arkham games was my favorite. And I was just gonna ask. You played Batman kind of across so many different movies, so many different media, but there's not so much continuity between each. Every time you get a new project, do you start from a blank slate, or do you kind of how do you go about that?
I always go back. Every time I get in the booth, and every time I start a new character, I always go back to that moment in Crime Alley as a child when he saw his parents murdered. That is when Batman is born. That crisis in his childhood, he never resolves. It haunts him. And the way he incorporates it into his life, the way we all handle trauma in different ways. Some people deny it and suppress it, and it screws them up. Batman incorporates it into his life, and he comes up with this other persona. And his goal is not to wreak havoc on the world, not to share his pain with the world, not to get back at the world. His goal is to heal the world, to take the crap that the world threw at him and turn it around and give it back as love. Because that's his whole objective, is to heal the world. I mean, one person can't do it, but he does everything he can for it, no matter what life throws him. And we all get crap thrown at us. I don't care how rich and powerful and successful someone is. They've had tragedies in their life. They've had disappointments. They've had failures. They don't brag about them. But you know they have because they're human. We all get kicked around. Everybody. It's how you react to it. That's what distinguishes you. And he takes that pain and he turns it into something positive. So that's what I always go back to whenever I get a new script. Now, what was weird, and that's a good question, is when I did Crisis on Infinite Earth.
Okay. That's right.
That was weird. Because their take on Bruce Wayne is that he gives and he gives and he gives and he gives his whole life, and at the end, he's an empty shell. There's nothing left. It is the most cynical, darkest take on Batman. And it made a lot of the audience angry. They said, that's not my Batman. And it's not my Batman. But it was the Batman of Crisis on Infinite Earth. It was where he ends up. And it's where many people end up, who give and give and give and give their whole life, and they realize there's nothing left for them. So playing that character was a real departure for me. It was fun, because as an actor, you like to stretch, you like to do something. I love playing villains. They're fun. But he was a much more villainous, darker Batman. And that was fun. So that was different.
Great question.
Yeah, I was wondering, well, with all the hundreds of television episodes and games and everything that you've done as Batman, I was wondering if you had a favorite episode or line or something that you did, or some kind of recording session that really stuck out above all the rest to you.
My favorite episode of all the shows, and it's really hard to pick one, because they're all beautiful. They really are. But any episode that dealt with his personal dilemma, his personal psychology, those are the ones for an actor that are just fun to play. And the ones I enjoy the most, and the ones I'm the most proud of. And there was an episode called Perchance to Dream, where he goes back, he's drugged by the river, and he goes back into his childhood to face his darkest moments. So of course he goes back to his adolescence. And I did Batman and Bruce Wayne, and then I did drugged Batman, and then I did adolescent Batman, teenager, and then I did Thomas Wayne, the father. So there were 5 voices in that one episode. So for an actor, that's just, like, being let loose in a candy store. I mean, it's like, yay! I get to act with myself. It's just me. No, I'm kidding. But it was fun. It was challenging. Because each character had to be distinct, but believably related. And it's a really good episode. It's just fascinating. It's beautifully written. And also Dreamscape was another one I really liked. So any of the ones that dealt with Bruce Wayne's psychology. But that's why I like Mask of the Phantasm so much. What a great movie! Isn't it great? I think of all the Batman movies, live action or animated, Mask of the Phantasm is the best movie. Because it tells the whole arc of the character. You get the whole why he became Batman, how he became Batman, through creating Batman. And then falling in love with Andrea Beaumont and realizing that life is not about vengeance, life is about love. And not being able to consummate it because of his oath to his parents, because of this vow that he made to his parents. So he goes to their grave, and there's a beautiful scene at the grave where he begs them to release him from his oath because he wants to have a normal life. And at that moment, a flock of bats come screaming up out of the cave, and they pull him back down to his fate. It's really like a Greek tragedy. And he realizes he can't escape his fate. So I love that movie. I think the whole arc of that movie is beautiful.
Mr. Kevin, first and foremost, I would like to say on behalf of myself and maybe some people in here, thank you so much for being the voice of our childhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
As a voice actor, when it comes to being in the moment and feeding off of others, when you're in that actual moment, are there certain times or scenes that you would have rather just been in the booth by yourself, or do you prefer to have the crowd with you that you're working with? Which one, as Batman, which one do you prefer?
That's a really good question. That's a really good question because it really depends on the scene. The ones where you're dependent on the other people in the scene, you want them there. Because you can only imagine so much what another actor's going to do with lines. And it's just different when they feed you those lines. But when you have an arc of like a soliloquy, it's almost better than that, because it's an internal experience, and the other actors can be distracted sometimes. There's a great luxury to being able to act in your own head, in your own imagination, when you're alone. There's something very liberating about it that you don't feel when there's the pressure of a dozen other eyes looking at you in the room. And you know that they're looking at you thinking, well, I could have done that better.
It would be wrong.
He did that okay, but I think I would have done it better. I mean, there's a little bit of, with actors, there's an ego involved. And there's always a little competition. So when you're alone, it is a more liberating experience for those internal moments. So that's it.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Conroy,
Hi.
I wanted to say it is such an honor to meet you. I
Thank you.
want to say thank you for helping me out with my childhood memory as when I was in rough times.
Oh, thank you.
My question is, for you as the voice actor, if Marvel would have come up to you for a Marvel character, like any type of superhero or villain, what would you be that character, and how would you portray that character?
Before I answer that, I wanted to say something about what you said about having a rough childhood and having Batman being there for you. That's why I come to Comic-Cons. Because when you're a stage actor, which is what I really am in my heart, and it's what my background is, there's a juice that you get on stage from the audience. Like this we're having here. This feeds me, this thrills me to have this interaction, this conversation. And it feeds stage actors. When you do voices, you put your heart and soul into the performance. You're putting your guts into the character, and you're sending it out into the ether. And you never know how it affects people. You never get that feedback. Well, this is where I get it. This is where I get the feedback. And I hear stories like that, where you think, it's an actor, it's a performance. And then you find out how it resonates with someone, how it touches someone. And it's a blessing. It's amazing. I was at the Chicago Comic-Con a number of years ago, and a woman came up to me, and she just wanted a hug. She said, "Can I just hug you?" I said, "Of course." And as I was talking to her, she started getting very emotional. She started to cry. I said, "It's okay, it's okay, it's not." She said, "You don't understand what this means to me." She said, "I had a really, really rough childhood. And a lot of the kids I grew up with ended up either in jail or on drugs." She said, "And I got out, and I have a life." She said, "My parents were there for me all the time, but they were working 2 and 3 jobs. So they just weren't home. And I was a latchkey kid. And you were my babysitter every afternoon. You were my conscience, my teacher, my playmate. You were the safe space for me. I learned so much from you." She said, "I just have always wanted to meet you." And I thought, you never know the effect you have on people. Often till years later. Just doing the job you do. And I hear stories like that a lot. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Conroy.
Okay, back to the character. There are a lot of characters I want to play. Come on. I'd love to play Wolverine. I think I'd be really good. I'd be a good Wolverine. But there are a million characters I'd love to play. So, yeah, anything.
Thank you, Conroy. Conroy.
Sure, thank you.
So I just got a heads up that we got like 10 minutes. We're going to try to get through as many of these as possible. So make your questions really good but really quick. What do you got, my friend?
Hello,
Hi.
I'm to Orlando. I grew up here. Appreciate you coming out.
Thank
It's my
you.
first convention. So, what do you change when you switch between voicing Batman and Bruce Wayne and older Bruce Wayne, Batman Beyond? There are very subtle changes between those voices.
This is your first convention?
Yeah, first of
Oh.
all.
Is this your first panel?
Yeah.
Welcome.
He's a virgin! I promise we'll be gentle.
But only a little. Only a little.
But you're starting at the top. Where are you going to go from here?
I've already dealt with IRS, so.
It's all downhill from here. The different voices. The different voices were my idea. I said to Bruce, because Bruce was telling me all this stuff about Batman when he was kind of educated. And I said, wait, he's the richest guy in town. He's the most eligible bachelor. Everyone wants a piece of this guy. And he puts on a mask and no one knows it's him. Is it serious? That's ridiculous. And there was a wonderful movie back in the 30s starring Leslie Howard called The Scarlet Pimpernel. It's a beautiful movie. And it's about the terror during the French Revolution. And he plays an aristocrat at the court who is, by day, a very flamboyant fop, wearing satins and silks, and being very wildly flamboyant. Because at night, he's robbing. He's saving the lives of people who are destined for the guillotine. And he is the Batman of the 30s. And I always loved that movie. So when he was, and you know what's amazing?
Come on, let's go.
I just found out recently, that movie was the inspiration for the guy who created Batman.
Of course.
Isn't that wild? I just found that out, and I thought that's crazy that two people 40 or 50 years apart would have the same sort of cultural connection to that. But so I said to Bruce, shouldn't it be a more convincing transition from identity to identity? I said, can I use a different voice? What if we use my voice as Bruce Wayne? And then I go to Batman. And I said, let me even play with it so he's more like, my image in my head was David Niven, was very sarcastic, very sardonic, very sophisticated and urbane, and playful. And originally they wrote him. Bruce Wayne was very playful. There was a lot of humor in Bruce Wayne in the early episodes. And then it became darker and darker and darker as they developed it. And they had to lessen the distinction between the two voices. They still liked the fact that they were distinct, but they had to lessen it because they said, you know, it's too light. It's too bright, what we're doing. We want to darken it. So they darkened the color palette, and they had to darken the voice a little bit. But they still kept it distinct because they liked that idea. And then when I do old Bruce Wayne in Batman Beyond, they were originally going to go with a 70, 80-year-old actor. And Andre Romano said, well, you know, Kevin's a stage actor. He plays characters. Let's see what he can do. So I did everything you're not supposed to do. I got in there. I said, Terry! Get off my lawn! Is it great? You can do an 80-year-old man. Because they still wanted to have, he still had to have the passion and the power. He's not a frail 80-year-old. He's a powerful 80-year-old man whose body just won't do what he wants it to do anymore. That's why that first episode, Batman Beyond, he pulls out a gun. And he's about to use a gun. And he looks at it and he realizes, this violates everything I stand for. If I have to rely on a gun, then I'm not Batman anymore. And that's when he decides to recruit the young guy. But he's still got the cojones of Batman, you know what I mean? So they wanted that power. But he's weakened physically. So they're okay.
Absolutely. Guys, I apologize for hitting our time limit, but Kevin will be downstairs at your booth. So
Be here all day.
yeah, so if you guys have some questions that you want to run through, meet him downstairs, ask your question, he'll answer it there. Thank you guys so very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Robbie.